Hi, welcome to Emsi webinars. Thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to a great webinar with Richard Hewitt, our Director of HE. We're going to be looking at how you should be connecting your Programme Spec to LMI, Labour Market Intelligence. So really looking forward to hearing what Richard has to say on that. Before I start, can I just remind you, if you have any questions, to put them in the question box on the webinar control panel, and we'll hopefully get back to those at the end of the presentation if time allows. Just to remind you, you will be getting a recording and also slides sent to you after the webinar, so feel free to share those with your colleagues. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Richard. Hi, Richard.
Thank you, Debbie, and hello, everyone. It's great actually to have a load of people from a real range of institutions join us, and so thank you very much indeed. And as Debbie said, we're looking at connecting LMI and in the context of program specifications today, and so hopefully this is going to be useful and interesting for you, and as Debbie said, any questions as we come to the end, I'll try to address those. But if we're not able to, or if I'm not able to answer your question, then really happy to connect offline and take the conversation further from there. So no problems at all with that. But let's just start with a bit of the general admin, because I know we've got quite a number of people who are well aware of Emsi, who work with us, who use our data on the session, and hello to all of you. But we also have quite a number of people who may be less familiar with us. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just briefly as an introduction. What is Emsi? We are fundamentally a labour market data analytics company. We're based out in the US, in Moscow, Idaho, but we also have a UK operation. We're down in Basingstoke, wonderful place aside from the weather right now, but it is the focus of our work really is to try and help people make better decisions by helping them understand the economies and labour markets that they exist within, and doing that through data and having a common language of data. And so we work across a number of different groups. So we work within the education and skills planning sectors, so that of course includes HE and FE. We work with economic development and regional planning organisations, so includes local enterprise partnerships, local government, central government functions, and we also look at we work as well with the employment and workforce planning corporations as well. So we're looking at large staffing companies and professional bodies and so on. And it's about helping each of these institutions or organizations connect with each other through this common language of labour market data to help them talk with each other and come to better decisions. And the type of data that we bring together is core labour market data, structural economic data, job postings analytics, which is drawn from the big data of analysing online job postings and breaking those down and taking the data points out and counting them and tracking them. Profile analytics, that's where we look at CV data really. So this is anonymized data captured when people go through a recruitment portal or something like that, and they've ticked a box saying they're happy for their anonymized data to be used for analytics, and we capture that, and it allows us to look at well, for the UK we've got about 14 million CVs that we're able to to pick apart and understand. So it's a good insight into the actual existing workforce, and Emsi skills, which is something we're going to be talking about a bit later in this presentation. So we're bringing all of these different types of data together, we interconnect them, we make them work at a local level, and then we make them accessible and usable, because it's all very well being accessible to an economist or to a data scientist, but actually if you want to make an impact with this data, then it needs to be usable by people who don't have those roles but do intersect with the labour market in what they do, and so we try to make that accessible and useful to them. So that's who we are and what we do. In terms of universities, and primarily we're speaking to universities today, although we don't only have universities represented in who's joined us today, but we certainly work with universities across a number of different themes. So employability, be it their planning portfolios or looking at the way they design courses, looking at careers advice and guidance, or talking to prospective students about how they might achieve their career goals through the programs that they study, and providing data to support that narrative. Engaging with employers, be it for placements, degree apprenticeships, or talking about how alumni have gone into work for employers. And again, it's not saying how to do that, it's simply providing the data as evidence for those types of activities. The same again for REF and KEF, so contextualizing research and impact. So if you're making an impact in an economy or in a community, it's having the economic data surrounding that so you can measure that impact, and particularly having it at a local level, which is very important because economies are different at a local level. Civic engagement, so this is really important with universities, and I think actually with the KEF as well, this is going to be increasingly important, particularly with the community engagement, and understanding those communities. So if you're looking at how the workplace is changing more to remote work, and understanding then that people who wouldn't otherwise be present in their communities because they may be commuting are now in their communities, and how that impacts the shape of that community and how a university might engage with it. So there are some interesting things there in the data, understanding how the labour market is changing and impacting that. And also, and this is something that we will touch on as well today, which is about confidence. So it's balancing the evidence base that you have for your decision. So you've got your your qualitative data, you've got your focus groups and your partners, but balancing that with some hard data and economic data as well, and that can give you more confidence in the decisions that you're making. So that's where we tend to engage with higher education in terms of labour market data, and what that data looks like when you break it down is something like this. What we can see here is that the building blocks of the data that we have here in the UK, and some of the sources for that. So along the bottom, you really have the anyway, what PowerPoint tells me is dark teal. I'm colorblind. I'm not sure that's a real color, but anyway, apparently those are in dark teal, and those are core data sources that we have, and we have supplementary data sources coming through in the light grey there, and in the dark grey are the means by which we can distill the data and understand it. So and in the green are the various elements that form our core LMI, so the structural economic data that we pull together. And you know, if you're an organization that doesn't use our data but you do intersect with the labour market, you'll be familiar with much of this because you'll be pulling them all together yourselves. And what we try to do is help you with that and do it for you, so it's all talking to each other in one place, viewable at a local level, at a granular level, and then we can feed other data sets and connect them into it, like HESA student data, for example. So that's what we're about: data, economies, granularity, and helping people make better decisions. So where does that bring us then for today? Well, in previous webinars, we've looked at using labour market insight, LMI, for validation purposes, and that's been particularly focusing on the business case. So answering that question of, well, are there jobs for people who are going to take this proposed degree, and how you might evidence that, and the type of data that you can see. And if you go to Emsi UK's YouTube channel or go to our webinar page on the Emsi UK website, economicmodelling.co.uk or emsidata.co.uk, under webinars, you can find the links to those in the webinar section. So that's what we looked at on the validation piece, the program approval idea. And we've also looked at it from a more pedagogical perspective and thinking, well, how can we use data about the labour market to think about what we're teaching and how we're teaching it. And that's something that can be very responsive because you don't need to make big changes to what a program is in order to make some tweaks to delivery that can help improve the employability outcomes of a program. So that's a different take. Today we're looking at where LMI fits in terms of program specifications, and this is often where program specifications have to demonstrate, for example, that they meet an the employability policy requirement of the university. And of course, these really do change between different institutions. Some are quite detailed, some are one-liners saying that our programs must prepare our students for the global workplace. And if you're from one of those institutions with something like that, I would just say as a reminder that your university is a global workplace, but it exists in a local economy. And all those businesses that you see on your doorstep, many of those will be tied into global supply chains, or at least regional and maybe multinational supply chains, or have international clients, or employ people from different countries. So the global workplace also exists in the local economy, and I think that's an important thing to remember when you're thinking about how you intersect with your employability policies. But we're going to look at whether there's a connection that can be made between data about the labour market and a program specification. And where we're going to look at first is, well, what's the guidance on this? Then we're going to look at where data fits into it, and then finally we'll look at, well, how you go about it. So hopefully that's a logical order and will make sense. So some of this, I expect all of it, you're going to be familiar with, but I just want to highlight some key points here. So guidance. Let's go first to the Bible of how to do all of this, which is the Quality Code. And if we just take some choice pieces from this, I think this is section A3, if I remember correctly. But what is a spec? It's a concise description of the intended learning outcomes of a program and how the outcomes are achieved and demonstrated. So what does this include? It will probably include what do we want our students to achieve, and So what things are part of that? We've got subject knowledge, their understanding, range of intellectual, subject-based and transferable skills and their application in a range of contexts. Also competency to practice, values and other qualities. And there's an example given. So what are the most, so perhaps what are the most useful practical skills, techniques and capabilities which are developed. And also it refers to the reference points. What reference points can we use to show what we want students to achieve, has currency within academic, professional or employer communities. And so what can we take from this? We can take that skills are relevant. I think that's important. And by skills, I've had it said before that, well, skills seems a bit FE, but we can see quite clearly that this is fundamental to what programs are about. But also when we talk about skills, we're not just talking about hard skills or something like that, or we're not just talking about soft skills. We're talking about, and certainly from Emsi's perspective, we're talking about all of these things: hard skills, soft skills, competencies, attributes. All of these things come under this umbrella term. But we can see that skills, first of all, as a thing, are relevant. Secondly, the labour market is relevant, and also that data as a reference point is relevant because it's a way to show that something has currency within an employer community. It's not saying it's the only way to achieve these things, of course not, but it's showing what we can see here is that there is certainly a relevance that we need to pay attention to. Also, we can look at some really quite wonderful work that Advanced HE's been doing on their embedding employability framework, which is one of their frameworks for enhancing student success. And Advanced HE have really a great piece of work, and here they talk about you need to define what employability is, and so they think about, well, what works well, how is it reflected in program and module learning outcomes, how is it employability assessed or validated, and how do you measure the impact of employability, activity and support. Lots of really good things. Engagement, they talk about how aware students are of actually what they're doing that supports their employability. Do they understand how what they're doing is transferable into other settings? Can they articulate it in an interview setting? That kind of thing. And they talk about gaps as well. So if you map your current program provision against what you're defining employability as being, where are the pieces that you're missing on that, and are you linking in with other parts of your institution to draw on their insight and data that, well, I would include in that data that they may have available to them. So as part of that, Advanced HE talks about the language. Is there a shared understanding of the terminology? So when you're talking about employability, you're talking about skills. Are you talking about the same thing? And I think that's a useful point because it has relevance when it comes to data as well. How do you prepare and anticipate and see the opportunities and challenges in terms of employability, and how that links to your programs, and what are the emerging trends? So capturing those is important. So we've got some key ideas there, but how do you go about capturing that kind of information? So the key one that I think is really commonly used are the qualitative sources. So universities will talk to employers directly. There are contacts between academics and employers. There are academics who are former employers, come from industry. You have sector and professional bodies, your PSRBs that you talk to, and who may be accrediting your programs and be seeking to see whether how closely you fit their frameworks. You'll have your program boards, and indeed I sit on one myself. Looking at bringing a range of different types of people to talk about what's happening. You've got the QAA's subject benchmark statements, which themselves are derived from focus groups of relevant people sitting down and talking to each other about what they see and what they think is important. This is all good. There's nothing wrong with any of that, but there are limitations to it, because often it can be reliant on a handful of relationships, so perhaps personal or institutional, and therefore you do need to ask, well, how representative is that of the whole labour market, or indeed the labour market in the geographies which are relevant to your students? Perhaps you're talking to some large employers, and perhaps they want to talk to you because they need to hire a lot of graduates every year. But the wider economy is filled with medium and smaller sized organisations, and while their needs may be far more diversified, they're a significant part of the market. And how well are you capturing their insights? And even if you're talking to a handful of them, how well does that represent the others? And that's a problem with then starting to talk to smaller organizations, is that very quickly it becomes difficult to keep it representative. And also, while the insight's great, when people talk about a skill or a need, are they talking about the same thing? There's no common language necessarily. People mean different things. One HR manager's view of one thing is different to another's. So it's difficult maybe to always be sure what people are talking about, and is it the same thing. So it's difficult to maybe to get insights at a level where you're aggregating the different statements that you're collecting from people. But there are quantitative sources for data, and particularly with skills data. And primarily when we talk about skills data, as opposed to job numbers or which occupations are employed in which industries, that's all core economic data. But if we're looking at skills data, then the key sources of that are online job postings, which we can collect. We can scrape those from job boards and sites and then process them. And CVs, those worker profiles I talked about at the beginning, where people might go through a recruitment portal and enter their details, and that is captured for analytics. So let's look at that data in a bit more depth. What can we get from this quantitative skills data? We can see what employers are talking about across a market and across the entirety of the labour market. No, I'll caveat that. So what it's not necessarily capturing is what those organisations that commonly don't ever post jobs for online. So if it's something that you'll never find a job posting for online, and something that someone will never apply for a job for online, then that may not be captured. But there are other places it may be captured. So on those worker profiles, if people dip into a part of the labour market at some point in their careers where they do go into a part of something where it's tracked, then we can capture it then, but we can see the historical data of what they did previously. So there is some tracking possible with it, but there's a caveat there. But much of recruitment does happen and is captured online, so there is a value to that. Also, what people write about in their CV or what they write about in a online job posting is an indicator of what they value. And that goes back to that point about what has currency with people. So if we can see what people are talking about in job postings or in their CVs, and it has currency, so that's important. It's also and of course, so you're getting that larger snapshot of the labour market. The other thing, of course, is you can measure it and you can track it, because if you're looking at being able to count, so saying you're quantifiable, in order to count this big data, we have to normalize the skills term. So we use algorithms that can look at a piece of text and pick out various skills terms within it and look at the context of those terms. So for example, if the word Python is there, does it mean a programming language or does it mean a snake? That kind of thing, and be able to determine, okay, is it a skill? What type of skill is it? But in order to capture it in a meaningful way, we need to be able to count it, and therefore we have to standardize what those skill terms are. We need a way to automate that, and so this is something we've done for many years, and we do that. So for example, you might see something like I can't remember which way around actually it is in the system, but you might write critical analysis, and the system will say, okay, that's what we'll tag as critical thinking. Or it may be the other way around. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but you know, it's a way of saying, okay, well, it's termed it in that way, but we recognize that as a term, but we'll count it under this, and it allows us then to measure and track what we can see. And that's useful because we can see it over time. So we can see emerging skills, declining skills, we can measure that skills demand. And the other great thing we can do is link that directly to other labour market data sources. And you know, that's what Emsi does as a specialty. But once you've got the data in a common language, you can then connect it to other things. So you can start to look at how that connects to job titles. You can look at how it connects to geographies. You can look at how it connects to occupations. And once you start looking at those connections, you connecting to earnings, you can start to see all sorts of different types of analysis. And of course, with the CV data as well, as I mentioned earlier, you're capturing the values that workforce place on their current skills as well. So you're getting quite a useful picture of what's happening. But there are things it doesn't do as well. And what I'm not saying is this is a panacea that answers all questions and replaces the qualitative data. It absolutely does not. But what I'm saying is it has a place alongside it. So things it can't do, at least not at the moment, is it can't pick out what isn't in a text. So while it can use contextual algorithms to see, oh, that means this, or that means the same as something else, so we can normalize it, but what it can't do is take assumed knowledge. So if you are looking at a job posting for, I don't know, a receptionist, it may say in that job posting you need Microsoft Office skills. But if you're looking at a job posting for a data scientist, the job posting won't specify Microsoft Office skills. It might specify Python, but it will be assumed that you have Microsoft Office skills. And so what we're not doing is picking those up. And that's why the context can be helpful in terms of making the links to other data sources. The other thing, and it's linked to that assumed knowledge, is it doesn't necessarily give you a level of competence. And that's because the context will give you that level of competence. So if we saw a lot of demand for a particular skill, you say, well, okay, but we're not saying at what level you need that skill, but what we can then start to do is see, okay, but in what type of job titles is that skill turning up? And then we could dig down into the data and look at it other ways to understand what that might be. But directly, What we're not doing is giving a level to a skill. We're just saying this is something that employers are talking about, and we have that data point with it. So in the end, what you're going to need is really, to get that full picture of what's happening, is that combination of qualitative and quantitative. So how do we go about doing that? So I've said that we already have found a way to capture skills terms, so we can capture that data, and what we've done is we have made that public and freely available to everybody. So our skills library, which is based on what employers and the workforce talk about in their CVs and job postings, and that is then normalized, so we have a standardization of terms. That is all available, and you can see that at skills.emsidata.com. And you can query that library. It's possible to get access to it via an API. So if you have technical skills, then that, or you have colleagues who have technical skills, then that's something they can directly program queries to, and you can have access to that. But just using that website, you can type in a skill, and if you typed in critical thinking, it would give critical analysis, and it would show how we write that in the skills library. And if it's in the skills library, then it will show you what that is and confirm that. So you can query that library, and that is there. So what is in there is driven by labour market data and what people write about. So it's data driven. It's also dynamic in that it responds to what we see in the data. And so we can see new terms emerging. And when that happens, what happens in the background is we pick up on that. We curate it as well. So every 2 weeks, our skills team update what the library looks like, and where we see something surfacing in the data, it kind of happens automatically, but then we put some human validation against that and put it in the right place. Is that a new skill? Is that a subset of something else already there? But it is just making sure that while the algorithms are wonderful, as we all know, we do need to have some human oversight of them, and so we put that there. And the other thing to say, it covers all manner of skills, so from hard skills all the way through to soft skills. So the kind of soft skills, we actually refer to them as common skills, because these are things that we see commonly across lots of different jobs. So things like maths, actually we refer to that as a common skill, because you see that needed across a range of applications, whereas you might not necessarily count that as a soft skill. But we look at hard and common skills, and we define them as such. There's about, I think it's 324 soft skills at the moment, and then there's about nearly 30,000 or around that level of hard skills. So because obviously you go into every single type of technical field, subject specialty, there's a lot of specific things within those that we can capture. So there's a lot of granularity there. But what it is, it's this common skills language. It enables this interaction between different data sets. It allows you to, because it's a common language and it's used in a coherent, consistent way, what you're able to do then is, if you're looking at the skills which are delivered across an institution, you've got a common way of talking about those. And also that link to the data, directly to data, it is a machine readable language that connects to labour market data directly, and so it allows you to have that direct connection to what's in a program and how that's reflected in the labour market. But how can we actually capture it? Because it's all very well saying, right, okay, so we've got our programs, we've got our course documentation, we've got our professional attributes, our graduate attributes, all of those are defined already. We've got all of that. How do we come about actually tagging or linking our course documentation to skills data? The first thing to say is for that to be possible, really, the first thing is it does need to be articulated in the text. So where do we look? We look to course documentation. Yes, I suppose you could interview every module leader, but look, that's not practical, and you know there will be those interactions, but that's not going to happen across an institution. To have a systematic way of doing this, you're going to go off the documentation, and your course documentation, particularly your program specification, is the document of record. So this is where you'd expect to capture these things, and therefore you do need it somehow to be articulated in the text. And by text, I'm talking about module descriptors. Really, that's where you would expect this sort of thing to be captured, and this already happens. I know employability teams speak to people, to academics, and talk about their modules and talk about how they connect to the labour market, and they talk about you know, how they're helping students achieve their personal goals. So a lot of this happens on a one-to-one basis, but it's not necessarily a systematic thing that links the data across an institution. So yes, there's a manual way. So you could have a course descriptor in front of you, module descriptor. You could then be looking at that, looking at what the key terms are, and going to our skills library on that link I showed previously, and just checking, okay, is this how it's termed in the Emsi skills library? If it is, fine, write it down. That, you know, copy and paste it. Yeah, that's doable. There is a quicker way to do it, which is automatically, and so we've got a free prototype. So again, you can try this out yourselves. There's a prototype of this, the skills extractor that links there on the slide, and what you can do is simply copy and paste your module descriptor information, and you might want to see within your pro forma which bits of the module description work best. I think this one is taken from a publicly available Open University module descriptor. So credit to Open University for the one you see in the screenshot there. But you can see how the text there has been tagged to the skills which are represented in the Emsi skills library. Now, it's not saying these are the only skills which are taught in the module. It's not saying anything about how to teach them or what's the most important to teach them. It's just saying these are the skills that we see in the Emsi library, which is driven by what employers primarily and workforce talk about, and having those in that tag allow us then to connect to other data, so we can start to do things with that data, so provide evidence for XYZ. So that's, you know, we're not trying to say this is what students must be focused on or what the area is. It just allows you that data connection, allows you to do it automatically. And as I said, that is available to everyone. And if something's not showing up that you think should do, then there are ways you can just type in some different ways of expressing it to see if that gives you a result, or you can come back to us and suggest that there's something missing from there. And you know, we're working with a number of universities where we're doing this right across their provision. We're doing it for them. Working across a few Northern American universities in the States and Canada, doing this, and you know, there are certain areas where we're picking things up and we're adding those to the library. And if you come across something, let us know and we'll get it in. But what we'll do is validate that against the data in the labour market. We also have a new tool that will be coming very, very, very shortly, Skills Sync, and this is basically like the skills extractor, but what it does is make everything exportable directly into a CSV, so into a spreadsheet. So if you're doing a big audit, then you can easily make that speak to other curriculum management systems that you might be using. But also it associates the combination of skills that you're seeing in the text that you've copied and pasted into the parser box. It associates those with the job titles. So you can see which job titles in the labour market are most closely associated with that grouping of skills, and that can be helpful as well, of course, looking at what where that's showing up in the labour market. And again, it's not making a value judgment, it's not saying whether or not that's right or wrong, it's simply making that link in the data, which you can then decide how to use that, what's the best practice to use it. We leave that to the experts in the sector to decide how to use that data. But I think that there must be a use to see, okay, we have these skills which are picked out, we've tagged them, and we can see in the labour market where we most commonly see those skills in terms of jobs, and then you can dig down into all sorts of data with that. So we're making that available, and really happy to talk about that, and I will do a follow-up presentation on what that looks like. So those are the practicalities of how you do it. So it can be automated, can be quick, and you can extract those skills quite readily. We're trying to make it so it's not necessarily an onerous task. But if you do this, then what are you doing? You're recording the skills data in your course documentation. So it is there recorded. It's like having machine readable skills data, and that is there, and then that can connect through to other things, and it's something you can track, something you can, if you have a labour market data system, you can plug it into it, and you have that automatically. If you enable other people in your institution to be able to connect to the data, there's transparency about where those links are being made and how they're being made. You can look at that skills provision right across the institution, so you could see where are commonalities between different programs. So particularly if you're looking at transferable skills, or indeed if you're looking at I don't know, if you're looking at short courses and you're trying to think, right, okay, we can see there's a skills need for this, we can see skills demand for this, where in the university, which at a modular level can we find some really good content that can help with that? And rather than phoning up module leaders, you can actually interrogate it this way. So and there's all sorts of clever things you could do with that. And again, going back to what I was saying before, tracking, identifying and tracking skills which are relevant to the programs you're teaching in the labour market, and seeing how they meet demand. So I think those are probably the core areas. But the job titles, and then connecting to local and regional data and looking at those trends as well as what's happening nationally, are real benefits to doing this as well. So it's not, as I said, it's not about replacing or undoing any of the excellent work that's already been done across universities on graduate attributes, professional skills, or indeed, you know, the key focus of helping students achieve what their personal goals are. And you know, of course, that is massively important. And this is in no way trying to replace that, supplement. It is, what it's doing is showing how you can use your program documentation to connect to skills data. And once you have that connection in the data, there's a lot you can do, which then helps you meet that key guidance of best practice, like we see from the QAA Advanced HE. And it's best practice that we see a lot more of now right across US institutions. We do a lot of this work there. We do it with Australian institutions. So you know, it seems to be a direction of travel, and a lot of this is available directly anyway via those links I sent you. So it's something maybe to think about how you can intersect with it. Once once you have that intersection, there's all sorts of questions you can start to answer. So once you're connected into the data, you can start to take that forward and think, okay, where's the evidence for employer demand? What do we need to maximize the employment outcomes for graduates? And that's a tricky one politically, because for some people in the institution, that's about helping students achieve exactly what they want to achieve and helping them define that. And absolutely, for other people in the institution, they are targeted on achieving certain types of graduate outcomes, such as SOC 1 to 3, high skilled occupational outcomes, and so people have different targets. For either of those types of themes, the data can support that, because it gives you a way to understand, well, where does everything sit in the labour market through the data, and so it can help with both aspects. How well do the outcomes for your course align with the expected destination? So you can look at, well, this is what our course delivers in terms of skills data, the skills that it delivers in the skills language, and then seeing, okay, we know where we think the program should end up, and you can compare and do a gap analysis, and so you start to look at something we call a sought versus taught approach to analysing programs. And how well does a portfolio of programs reflect local economy, the needs of the local economy, and how can you demonstrate that to external partners like your LEPs and indeed government when you're looking for funding? Being able to connect things through skills data is important, because it's easier then to quantify things and build a case and start to attach numbers to things, which will always help with that type of engagement. Connecting with employers directly, understanding the actual jobs, the trends within jobs, where there are difficulties filling jobs, the skills that those particular jobs that people are finding difficult to fill, what are they? All of that, once you start connecting to the skills data, all of this starts to come to the fore, and you can connect your programs to that. Skills gaps, so you can start feeding in your completions data, you can start feeding in your graduate outcomes data, connecting that to skills data, and then connecting lots of different data sets, looking for, okay, how they align, where are the differences, and looking at it from different angles, so you can start to maximize what you're doing. Then of course, earnings. Yes, you've got your Leo data, which is quite historical. You've got salary data in your GOS and your previous Delhi returns. We can see earnings in the labour market in terms of what's published by the ONS, and we connect that through. But also we can see what the advertised earnings are in particular jobs. And again, if you've got the skills data as a starting, you can start with the skills data and work your way through from that skills data to all of this other type of data as well. So it gives you a starting point to connect to the rest of this. So rather than guessing at where do you start, where do you connect in with labour market intelligence or labour market insight, you can start with what you already have, which are your course documentation and what is articulated within it. So that is basically covering everything that I wanted to talk about. I wonder, Debbie, if we've had any questions in the meantime, or has everyone logged off?
No, we still have attendees. No, that was very interesting. Thank you, Richard. No, we haven't got any questions, so you did a really good job. So thank you for that.
Well, if people do have questions and thinking about, well, how do you go about this, or how any questions related to doing it, or you're interested to see some data, so what would the data look like for this or that, drop me a note. You've got my contact details there. I'm very happy to share and show you how it works. Very happy to provide that. So if I can help immediately, then that's what I'll do. So if you have a pressing kind of decision to make on a program, you're looking into something yourself, drop me a note. I'll see what I've got, and we can have a chat about it. So do reach out. But great, I'm glad that, oh, we have a question. I saw a question come in, which is, let's see. It's, yeah, how do we link HESA data to job vacancies? What assumptions do we make about the degree's likely profession? That's a really good question. That's a really good question. So there are different approaches to doing this. So one way of doing it is looking at, okay, what are the reasonable and likely outcomes from a particular program. And so some work we've done has been mapping to JAX codes, so occupations to JAX codes. So we map job vacancies and openings to 4-digit occupations, and then we can map the other way from JAX codes to those. So there is that type of mapping. Something else we're working on right now is with the graduate outcomes data, which is where what we can do is see, okay, at an aggregate level, so we could do it at an institutional level, what the outcomes are per program, but we could also look at benchmarks across the country and say, okay, what are those outcomes for programs? What do they look like in reality 15 months out? So using graduate outcomes survey to help us make that link, because those then are tagged to occupations. So we could do it that way. There's less assumptions about that, although it is fixed to 15 months. The other way of doing it is through skills. So taking a degree program, tagging the skills of the entirety of the program, and then there are questions about how you look at the module options. So you probably go for the route most commonly taken by people through that degree. So you look at something like that, and then you connect at skills level into the labour market, which is the most granular way of doing it. Now, when our consulting teams do this, we actually do all of it typically. So because these are different lenses through which to understand this, and each one makes slightly different assumptions. But if you use each of the methods, then what you do is you can put them side by side and see what they tell you and take it from there. So those are 3 different ways that we would take the HESA, HESA completions data to see how that feeds into the labour market. I hope that answers the question. Obviously, I can't see any nodding heads, but happy if there are other questions about that. Really happy to. Oh yeah, it did answer the question. Wonderful. But really happy to talk about any of this and methodologies. As I said, we have a consulting team that kind of does this on behalf of universities, and we also have tools that enable you to do it yourselves. So we're happy to kind of facilitate in any which way, and certainly from a personal point of view, as a way that we can get you a quick win, just get you some data, just get in touch. Really happy to share. But Debbie, I don't know if you have some concluding remarks on what we're doing with slides, etc.
Well, the slides and the recording, as I mentioned at the beginning, will be sent to all our attendees today. So you will get those recordings. And as I said before, please feel free to share with your colleagues. Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
And just to say, I'll be back to show you all SkillSync at a later date. But if you want a preview, do reach out to me. Thank you.